This is the House of Hockey podcast,
where we talk about the game and the lifestyle.
We've got opinions as hockey fans, friends, and from the female perspective.
Welcome to our house.
Welcome to the House of Hockey podcast. This is episode 178. Let me move my mic a little closer to my face. My name is Ray. I'm one of your co-hosts. Breezy, as we know, is still on the long-term injured reserve list for the podcast. She's doing just fine, though. Today, no guest co-host, but we are having a guest, a returning guest, Frank Longo. He is a scout for the Kenai River Brown Bears in the North American Hockey League, hashtag Brown Bear Nation. He's also the owner of Gremlin Goaltending. I'll ask him to fill you in on what all that is that he is doing outside of the scouting world. Frank was on episode 102, and at that time, he was an assistant coach and goalie scout for the varsity women's hockey program at Nipissing University. Did I say that right?
Yep. Yeah.
Pronunciations are not my forte here, as everybody knows as they listen. And he was doing goalie scouting and independent scouting and all kinds of stuff. So we are thrilled to have you back, and you're in a new position. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be back and have another chat here. So excited to get going.
Yeah. Tell me about this team that you are now scouting for. We were talking a little before we started. They're in Alaska. You obviously, as a scout, don't have to be physically in Alaska with the team necessarily for day-to-day activities. But what is this team all about, and what's their identity for people who don't know? And I mean, it's incredible in Alaska. You know, that seems like so far away and remote and different, even though it's part of the United States and it's, you know, right there by Canada. But what is that all about there?
Yeah, so they play in the North American Hockey League, like you mentioned there, and they've been around, I believe, since 2007. So they're kind of one of the, you know, not older teams. That league's been around for a while, but they've been, you know, around for a decent while. So, you know, they get a good fan base, average around, I think, 2,500 a game. Obviously not too much to do besides hunting and fishing up in Alaska. So, I mean, the whole town kind of rallies around them. And obviously you have the two other Division I schools there, University of Alaska Anchorage and Alaska Fairbanks. So a lot of hockey up in Alaska, which is great. It's good for the program. It's good for just the sport in general, just being able to get all the way up there, up north. But yeah, I'm the Canadian scout for Kenai River Brown Bears. And basically my responsibilities is not just the goaltending, but also players as well. So I'll be scouting, you know, Tier 2 Junior A in Canada, because we're at that league where we're, you know, a little bit above, you know, Canadian junior hockey at this moment, not the OHL or the QMJHL or the WHL, but for Tier 2 Junior, it's definitely a step above. And, you know, we have players in, you know, the North American Hockey League that get drafted straight to the NHL at the NHL draft. So, you know, it's kind of like a step below the NHL in a sense with the USHL. And it's historically known for the NCAA Division I commits. So they get a lot of commitments out of this league. And actually, I had one of my clients, I think I mentioned him last time I was on the show, Greg Orzo. He's actually at University of Alaska Anchorage as a freshman. So he got a scholarship after I coached him at Stansted College in Quebec, played for Odessa and Aberdeen in the North American Hockey League, and then he got his scholarship. So just a kind of an example of, you know, a player that's moved through the process and got there. And yeah, it's definitely an exciting opportunity. Yeah.
That's exciting. Okay, talk to me a little. We'll stick with the scouting side of things, and then we'll go into some of your like all around player, you know, family coaching, helping, scouting, you know, stuff you do. But what are you seeing in those leagues now as far as like style of hockey being played that's coming up that's maybe different than what, you know, we're always talking about the differences between like the old school hockey and the new school hockey, and we see so much of it clash on the ice, and we see it work when it's done right. But, you know, I think people are like, that's the way the league's going to go in the NHL, where it's just going to be young, fast, and we're never going to have, you know, Ryan Reeves again or Pat Maroons, and just get over it. But like, is that really the case in what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think the game is definitely changing. I mean, physicality is not as prominent unless it's kind of, playoff hockey. And obviously fighting is kind of, fuzzling out. But I mean, I think it's just the difference in development in each country. If you want to go kind of down that world, U.S. hockey is a step above. Definitely Canada. Hockey Canada is kind of faltered a little bit, and you can see with the World Juniors and our development teams, even the women's hockey side of things. The U.S. is really catching up now over the last, I would say, 5 years, and they just have a better development model. Just from starting from at 7, 8 years old to all the way to junior hockey. So and college hockey. So I mean, I would say the development, you can see the differences. You see a lot more American-born players drafted now than Canadian, or have success, I should say, at the next level. So I think that's a big thing, and I think the U.S. has kind of taken a model of what Sweden's done and Finland's done and Russia, for example, because they've always had kind of these development models put in place over the last couple decades at least, and that's why I feel like U.S. hockey is getting there development wise, and you see it with these prospects. The most exciting players right now that have the best shots and the most accuracy, and are just so fun to watch. The Austin Matthews, the Zegras, Caulfield, all of them, right? Like where are they from, right? And that's where you're starting to notice that they've developed in their own country, and they've gone to a point now where I think the game is a lot more quick. Obviously, there's more agility to the game, east to west, and yeah, we're getting some pretty cool hockey players to watch in today's world, which makes it difficult to scout goalies because these releases now and these shots are just so hard. So you can't even almost blame the goalie, but at the same time, it is a clear view shot, and that's where you kind of decipher who's what goalies ready for the next level in that regard with tracking these releases.
Yeah. And technology's
Yeah.
advanced a lot too in the training, even for goalies
Yeah.
as well. I mean, there's so many different kinds of, I don't even know what you call it, but there's like lights and different balls
Yep.
and headgear and things you can do to increase your reaction time and things like that. But I think that's really interesting to hear that perspective. When you say things are going quicker and faster, I think something that's really thrown a curve into fans' thoughts is the Matt Rempe's of the world. Rempe, like
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
Rangers, right? You see, like, all of a sudden, we haven't seen a guy like this who's young coming into the league. Yeah, he might not be staying, beyond playoffs, but he's gigantic and he's still got
Yep.
enough skill to be able to do this, but he's injuring people because of his height and his size, not necessarily on purpose, but just due to his nature, or at least that's what I want to believe about him. But I don't think
Yeah.
he's doing anything malicious out on the ice, really. But what does that look like, though, then in the future? Like, how are we training these younger, faster, skilled players to handle these big guys? Because, like, they're still going to be dealing with it, even just in size. Because if you're
Yep.
18 and you're coming into the NHL, there's still guys on the team who are fully grown men, and you're still going to be dealing with some of that. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think with Rempe's situation, I think just being fearless at a young age, like he's going toe to toe against the best in NHL, and
Yeah.
guys respect him for that. Obviously, a couple things happened afterwards where players have lost respect for him. I guess there was a couple calls he ran after a few people. I didn't watch the game, but I heard about it on Twitter. But yeah, I think the courage for him is big.
Mhm.
I think that he's able to go toe to toe at a young age. And you're not really seeing much of that, right? Because these players have so much on the line. Teams aren't drafting enforcers anymore. They're looking for strictly, guys that can play hockey. If you're going to last in the NHL, the reason why, maybe Ryan Reeves and, a couple of those other players that lasted so long is because they're still able to play hockey. They're not just
Mhm.
enforcers. They're still able to produce, even if it's, 10 goals a season.
Yeah.
And they produce that energy for players. So I think just knowing your role, especially in junior hockey, and there are some big guys that might not be as agile, might not have the best hands, but they're very smart, with their hockey IQ, and they're not afraid to be physical. And that's when you can kind of fit them into those roles where they'll protect those superstars, on the first and second line, and step up when they need to, but you won't see guys come in as much as, last decade or even before that, who were strictly there to, kind of rattle up the crowd and defend their players. So I feel like it's just knowing your role and being confident that you can stand up for yourself and others, and having those type of guys on your team is crucial too, especially in the playoffs.
It is. It's hard to deny, though, how much the fans love the enforcers and the fighting and the Rempies of the world, though. Because, like,
Yeah.
this kid blew up the internet and everybody is talking about him and nobody had ever heard of him before. And
Yeah.
I think we crave that as fans, wanting still to see that in a game. I mean, will there still always be a place for it?
Yeah, I think there always will be a place. It's kind of the same thing as artists that have the one hit wonder. They have two good songs, and that's pretty much all they kind of produce. Like that might be what his career is. He hasn't really produced the in the hockey sense things. He's also got the crowd. He's got his name out there fighting. But how long are you going to be able to maintain that to keep a career in the NHL now? That's the question. I think for him is, focusing on actually playing the game now. He got his name out there. People are looking at him. But at the end of the day, I'm not saying this is what's happened so far, but if he starts, being a -3 and, every game and just can't keep up in the actual game itself, then I think that's going to hurt him. And you might see a guy like him fizzle out. Again, it's too early to tell. He has a lot of potential. Big guy. Obviously, they saw something in him. When they drafted him, it's just a matter of him getting back to that and being effective, right? Like you have guys like Matt Tkachuk, right, in Florida. Like that guy's a little pest. Brad Marchand, he's not very big, but he's a pest. But these guys can play hockey. That's the difference, right? They can get under your skin. They're not afraid to fight, but they can also play the game.
Yep. So are
Yeah.
those some of the qualities that you're looking for when you're scouting then for Kenai?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that in the North American Hockey League for scouting for that is I think it's I look a lot for character. That's the first and foremost. Like I think that's the best trajectory to see where a player's going to go is what family they come from, how hard they work, how are they in the classroom, because obviously like our goal is to either get them drafted in the NHL and also try to get them an NCAA commitment. And you can't get to NCAA if unfortunately you don't have the grades or you don't really take school seriously or the stuff outside of the rink. So I like guys that get involved in the community. Are they work hard in school. They have aspirations and academically as well. And I think just how they are within their teammates. Are they a leader? Doesn't mean they have to be outspoken. They can be soft spoken, but just do they lead by example? Do they work hard? Do they put in those extra hours? I think that's the first thing I look for, and then we get into kind of the nuts and bolts of how they do statistically and how they progressed over the years. I think that's another thing that a lot of scouts kind of don't really look at. Is they just kind of look at that current season and they're like, oh wow, they're lighting up, but were they lighting up maybe the same league a couple of years? Like maybe they need to move up, right? Or have they struggled and then progressed really well over the last 3 years in different levels, different age groups? It's all situational, but I think being able to see how far they've come, in a 2, 3, 4 year span gives you an idea that they're progressing the right way because they're doing the right things off the ice and on the ice, obviously. But they're constantly learning and getting to where they need to be, and then you can kind of predict. Hopefully, they'll be an impact player when they come, to the North American Hockey League or beyond.
Talk to me a little bit about the hockey culture. This is something that's really been in the news, in the, Hockey Canada stuff, and even in the NHL, we've seen a lot of recent, like off ice challenges with people's character in playing hockey. And you talked about just how important that is to have a good character and be a well-rounded, committed, driven team player focus. Where does that go wrong in your opinion? Like how does that happen? How do these stories happen when the scouts and the teams are so focused on finding these really quality players that are team driven, right? Like where's that disconnect in your opinion? And if this is like too far out of the scope of where you feel comfortable, that's fine too. But I just think it's interesting that there's like a bit of a mismatch in some of the things that have been happening lately. And I think people want answers to why, because this is a sport we love and we know how committed the teams are to really developing these young players and taking care of them.
Yeah, no, I have no problem talking about it. I mean, obviously, not going in too much depth, but I think the biggest thing for these players, I think, is a lot's thrown at them at a young age, especially with these players in the World Junior teams and stuff. And there's a spotlight on them at a young age, and sometimes it gets to their head. It's kind of, I don't want to say a cockiness, if you will, but it kind of it makes you not as level headed. And I feel like that can get you into trouble, right? And I think we see more of it, with us both being in the hockey space. That's what we're following. That's what's in the mainstream media for us, because that's what we're following. So we see a lot more of it with our sport, but I feel like it's in every sport. Like, NFL players, the same things happen. Because again, they're getting all this money, they're getting all this fame at a young age, and it gets to their head. And then, they might start treating, females or males the wrong way. And just and that's the thing, right? They just think they're kind of maybe a little bit above everyone else, and it's getting to their head. And then eventually you have to hang up the skates or hang up the cleats in football, and everything kind of comes back down. And that's I think when a lot of them end up suffering mental health issues, and we can go down that world. But I think it's just being exposed at a young age and not having the maturity to be able to handle it, or maybe not having the right voices. It's sometimes, again, like with these agents and parents and all this money and fame and everything getting thrown at you, it's hard to really navigate it. So then you end up resorting to drugs, alcohol, doing the wrong things, and then you go down a wrong path. And I think you see the guys like the Sidney Crosbys of the world or the Connor McDavids. The reason why they're so great is even with all that fame at that young age, they stayed on task. They had a goal in mind, and they're still doing it, at 27 or 37, like, with McDavid and Crosby, right? They're still doing it even after accomplishing, certain things in their career. So I think that's what you're looking for, is guys that don't let the hype kind of get to them. They have a goal in mind. They knew what they were doing when they were going into it, and they're sticking to it. And I think that's a big thing you want to look for as well.
How do you teach that and implement that into the players that you do scout? And then even in some of the work that you do outside of the scouting, how do you get that through a parent's head, or how do you get that through a player's head and him or her's head to teach them that this is like a really important lesson to learn and character to build and that kind of thing? Because that's not something that you can just that's something that has to be learned, I think, for a lot of people, because like you said, they are so young. They're so young and when they get started, so many of them. And if they don't have the right influences around them, it can go sideways. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just finding what drives them. I think it gets a little deep, but when they get to that level, you kind of have to. It's sink or swim at that point. You got to go either down one path or the other. It's, like for example, if you're in your OHL draft year, or if you're in your USHL draft year, like there's certain paths, and I think it's the question I always ask my athletes, and sometimes it catches them off guard. I give them a couple days, think about it and write it down. And it's, how do you want to be remembered in this game? Like, how do you want to be remembered? What legacy do you want to leave? Because the things you do off the ice is going to follow that legacy. And there's a lot of amazing hockey players that come through. Like, there's, unfortunately, not everyone's going to be Wayne Gretzky. Not everyone's going to be Sidney Crosby. But if you look at certain players, right, with what they do in their organizations, how much they gave back to the community, or how they perform on the ice and how they help their teammates around them. And like, for example, one guy that comes to my mind just recently, Jerome Iginla, right? Like, sure, do you think of him as one of the best players of all time? Probably not. Is he an exceptional player? Yes. Like, he's up there. He's just not in the top 5, right? But the reason why Calgary loves him so much is what he did for that community, what he did for that organization, how hard he worked. I know they never brought back a cup, but they were so damn close. And that's just like one example of a player, right, that his legacy is what he actually did off the ice just as much as he did on the ice. And that's kind of what you have to start thinking at a young age, is year by year you want to keep producing those results where and it's only going to help the organization, right? Like, you're producing these results for these players, these fans and these people that you interact with in the community that want to come and support the team more, and it gets more of a fan base going. Like, it's all kind of like a plan, right, in within the organization. And I think that those players that understand at a young age is the players you want on your team, because they have the skill set. They've done it before, maybe with a junior organization that's, anywhere in North America or even in Europe. And then when they come to their their NHL organization, they know what to do to keep it going.
And the thing is, not everybody's going to win a Stanley Cup. Those odds, which
Yeah.
I don't have in front of me, are probably really low. And to be able to make a lasting impression and a legacy, not just on the ice I mean, we were talking about this with Henrik Lundqvist. Like, he doesn't have a Stanley Cup, but the man is a legend for everything he does, right?
Yep. Exactly. Yep. And that's what I mean, right? And even Longo never won a Stanley Cup, right? He's in the Hall of Fame
Mhm.
already. And obviously, he was amazing off the ice as well as on the ice, obviously with his performances. But that's another example, right? There's a lot of guys. Curtis Joseph, if you want to go really back a little bit there, right? Like, I know these are goalies, but there's a lot of players as well. We can go down the list, but that make an impact. They just couldn't seem to win the Stanley Cup, but they'll be remembered in their organizations for a long time because of what they've
Yeah.
been able to do, right? So,
What do
yeah.
you think of that two goalie system that's played, like the AB goalie and system in the NHL?
Yeah, I think personally I like it. I think it's great during the regular season. The game, like, I think we talked about this even 2 years ago. Like, I think the game is getting really hard on goalies' bodies, especially the way it's played. With the post play, the RVH, we can get all into the technical side of things with it, but really tough on the hips, tough on the knees, obviously ankles, and even mentally, right? They play 82 games. I can't believe goalies used to play 72 games out of the 82, right? Like, like, again, going back to Luongo, Kippersoft, Broder, like those guys play a lot of minutes. And I think having two guys you can trust, especially with injuries, where one guy's kind of on a cold streak, you can go back to the next. I think having two is really important. And then when you get into the playoffs, I think, if one guy's, you have a good sample size too, right? If they both
Yeah.
split 50-50, it's 41 games each. You get a good sample size and who's really been, the better goaltenders of the season. And then you might start him game one. And if he goes on a tear, you just keep going with him. We saw with Colorado, right? A couple years ago,
Yeah.
with Kemper and Frank, Frank Koo, Pavel Fanku, I think is his name. He was the backup to Kemper, but he came in when Kemper got hurt with the stick in the eye, and he produced well and got them to the final, and then Kemper came back, and right. So sometimes you got to have 1A 1B situation, or at least a guy that you can count on that when he can go and play in a playoff game, right? And I
Yeah.
think it's definitely beneficial that teams have two solid goaltenders, and to be honest with you, I think you should really have three. If you can have a third, a guy that's really itching to get into the NHL, who's capable of playing, just hasn't got a shot yet, or is dominating the AHL. I think just in case for these injuries that do happen, and it's very prominent with these goalies in the NHL today. To have someone that can come in and also be reliable as well. So that goes into the whole goalie scouting world, right? You want to make sure you have enough prospects on your goalie draft list, or your prospect pool, just in case, just like you would with the players, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I I think it's interesting, that system and how it works. And I think what a lot of the fans' reactions have been, especially in the playoffs, like you mentioned, is when the certain coaches, I can't remember which teams, but like certain coaches stuck to the switching between the goalies
Yep.
in playoffs. And some people really had strong opinions about that and did not like that and wanted like the 1A goalie to always be
Yeah.
in. And I think their fans, of course, are quick to blame and say, like, whatever,
Yep.
one A is doing horrible, you should have one B in that, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
But I mean, your strategy, from based on what you just said, would be like, if you've got someone on a heater or is on a streak or is doing really well in net, you leave them in the playoffs. Is that
Y-
accurate? Is that what you
Yeah.
believe?
Yeah, I think like again, like it's a sample size. If you split them, even if it's 60-40,
Mm.
obviously there's a reason why that one guy is maybe playing 60, if it's contract reasons, whatever, of the 60% of the season. Um, if he's played better historically over that season, I think he should be getting at least get game one. And then again, it's a game in playoffs, it's a game by game. You reevaluate. You don't just say, you're going with the one guy for the whole series. But again, it could also hurt you. And look at it. Look at Minnesota last year, right? They did go with Marc-Andre Fleury, and I'm a big Fleury guy, and he struggled a little bit, and then they didn't know what to do, and so they went back to Gustafson,
Yep.
and he struggled, and I think they got swept last year, from what I remember. So, that, and they were using both goalies, and they just couldn't seem to figure it out to even get a win. And I think that's where it gets kind of tricky. Is like it's making so if you start one goalie in game one, and then you make the decision to go back to him in game two, and he loses again, that's when it makes it a
Right.
really tough decision. What are you going to do in game three? You're going to go back with that goalie who's played 70% of your games all year, or are you going to go with the 1B? And then if he loses and everyone's so it is a really tough choice as a head coach. As back in the day, you had your one guy. No matter how bad it went, you're going back to him.
Yeah.
But again, even Boston, right? Like they've had the
Hmm.
best goalie tandem for the last 2 years, but last year in the playoffs, they got knocked out right in Game 7 to Florida, and again
Yeah.
they were kind of going back and forth with Swayman and Allmark. So it can hurt you, but I also think it can benefit you. And we haven't had enough of a sample size since teams are starting to do this. But again, like I said, Colorado worked for them. Pittsburgh with Murray and Fleury. That's been almost a decade ago. It's crazy to think that, but
Right.
I think you're starting to see some teams, right, doing it more. And I think in the next 5 years, you might get an idea: does it actually work? And I believe it does. But I definitely like seeing one guy kind of go with the horns during the playoffs, unless something happens.
Yeah. I think I would tend to agree with you on that. Give the guy who's the healthiest mentally, physically ready to handle the pressures of it, and give them the opportunity, even if they take a loss in one of the games. I think it's important. It was depending on the player's mentality and their mental state, right? Too. Like if they can if they thrive on wanting to recover from a loss and prove they can win and different things like that, I think um, it all depends, because as we know, goalies are a unique breed. You
Yeah,
mentioned
yeah,
Flurry,
yeah,
and I wanted to get your thoughts on like Flurry and Quickie. Both of
yeah,
them still in this league, still able to perform at a pretty high level, pretty consistently, at least this
yeah.
season. Um, what are your thoughts on those two and what separates them apart from the other ones? Obviously, a little bit of luck with being able to be healthy and still play, of course, but what else is it that those two guys have?
I think just the commitment to their craft. I think, they're always looking
Mm,
for new ways to get better. And they're going with the times of the game. They're not kind of stuck in their ways, but they still bring in their unique style. So they will adapt to what the game has become, but they will also still keep doing what's made them successful. And I think that takes a lot of, reconstruction, a lot of evaluation in their game each offseason. Jonathan Quick looked like he was done, right? But he come into New York, and Benoit Laird, the goalie coach there, he's I think arguably the best of all time, if not one of the best. And he's transformed them, and he's done great work with Igor Shishkin and
mhm.
Lundqvist, right? The list goes down. Cam Talbot, all those guys, right? And I think that again, he's reevaluated his game, but he's still the same old Quick. He's still very athletic, covers the bottom net well. Can still make those spectacular saves, and he tracks really well. And the same with Fleury, right? Like he still plays a very athletic game, and that's what you just said, which is crazy. Is like they're still doing the splits, and they're getting up there in age, and they're still playing the same way, and they're still performing. And it's because they're not going to shy away from what made them successful in the first place. But again, you see they're a little different now in their post play, and they're a little more conserved around the crease, and that takes work with your goalie coach, a lot of video, and understanding why you're going to be making those changes. And I think that's for them. They're not as stubborn as maybe some other guys that have faded out of the league. Is this is the way I play. This is the way I've been my whole career, and I'm not changing it. And those are the guys that unfortunately get left behind. But guys like Fleury and Quick, they're both Hall of Famers. Quick is tied with Miller now for the most wins in American goalies. So
Wow.
if he wins his next game, which he probably have at least a few cracks at it before the season ends, he'll be number one, the best American born goalie. I already think he is. He's won 3 Thomas Miller number
Wow.
one, right? So we can go down that whole debate, but you have 2 Hall of Famers that are
For
still
sure.
doing it, and there's a reason why they're doing it. So
Yeah, I think that's a really fair assessment on those two, especially that just that sort of commitment, and that mental strength and love and
Oh, mental,
passion
yeah,
and remembering their purpose and what they want to leave
exactly.
their legacy, like you said.
Yep.
And all
Yeah.
that's a
Yep.
good example of what you were describing earlier. Do you want to talk about the PWHL and the women's side since you've been around the women's game a lot as well?
Yep.
First of all, have you been to a game yet? PWHL game?
No, I unfortunately haven't, but I do watch a lot of it on TSN. Actually, my girlfriend has a family friend who plays for Ottawa, PWHL Ottawa, Zoe Boyd. So, we usually when
And they're
Ottawa is,
crushing it right now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So when they're on the TV, we like to watch and support her, and I think again it's great for the game. Seeing these massive crowds and seeing these players being able to actually live out their dream. I think that's what a lot of us that were involved in the women's game are still involved. That's what we're hoping for, and it's here now, and it's exciting. And I think it's still kind of surreal to think like on a nightly basis, there's professional women's hockey on TV, and it's commercials and the sponsorships. Like it's just to me, it's exactly what we were hoping for, and I'm so
Yeah.
excited for the players and the coaches in the league, and I hope continued success for them. Obviously, I think it's going in that direction, and it's very exciting for the game of hockey.
The women's game has different rules, and I think it's okay. And I think so many people are like hung up on like, well, they can't hit as hard. That I'm like, it doesn't matter because it's still just as exciting to watch and see what they can do without all those other things. And we've now gotten players who've gotten suspensions for like bad hits and for like fighting and
Yep.
stuff in the league. Like it's happening and it's still just as exciting. So what do you say to those haters who are like who don't get it? Because I don't think people get it yet.
Yeah, I think again it's just the passion, right? Like I think the reason why we all fall in love with the game, obviously, is our connection to the game. Obviously, we all have a beginning to it, or why we're connected to it. And I think it's just the goals and the big saves, the big goals. An amazing play that happens, right? It's not so much about the physicality. Like, sure, the physicality makes it exciting, but I think it's really just the game of hockey in general. And I think these girls, they're exceptional athletes, and there's some of these goals are incredible. Like some of these shots are just, like they're bar down, posting in, great special teams. Like these girls are blocking shots, and these goalies are making big saves on a 5-on-3 on a 1-goal game. Like that's the exciting part of the game. And I think that's what we need to focus more on. And I think honestly, some of these rules you might see in the PWHL might even translate into the NHL one day, right? Because some of them are pretty cool. I don't know them, and I don't know why. I don't know them to a certain extent, but I heard that the overtime rules are pretty cool. And I saw on Twitter they might NHL start doing them, and I haven't really been able to look too much into the PWHL overtime situation
Mhm.
there. But I mean, they're saying it'd be something cool for the NHL to kind of look into. So I mean, that's just an example right there, right? They're maybe beyond beyond the time of hockey as of right now, and it might even start going in that direction with all leagues in hockey, professional leagues in hockey. So
Yeah, it
yeah,
was a lot of fun. It was such a fun experience, and watching them play and their skill was unreal to see. I think it's a little bit different. I talk about this too, like in the US media than in the Canadian media. You've got games on TSN there.
yeah,
We've got them on some of our local channels, and yeah, they're on YouTube for free, which is great because like we have no excuse not to watch. But I think just sort of that national exposure that you guys get, and of course I think hockey, of course, is way more popular in Canada across the board than it is in the US. So you've got that going for you. And I just think the Canadian teams have done such an incredible job of promoting it
yeah,
and having them do like the Oilers do that like in team skills competition thing. And I
yeah.
think Ottawa does, and they had the women come and they were part of it. And I think just the exposure to it is great. But we're seeing small things here, like the Anaheim Ducks of all the teams were like wearing the jerseys and is into walk-in the other day. So we're seeing it, and I just want to do what I
Yeah.
can to promote it because I think it's
100%. Yep.
really exciting.
Yeah, yeah, I think the T Comper and his sister they did something where they
Mhm.
played the same day, and he wore her jersey into the rink, and she wore his, and I know a few more of his teammates also wore her jersey. So I think it's cool that you see the NHL and NHL players and PWHL players, kind of supporting each other. Because again, it's the same game. Sure, there's a couple of rules that might be a little different, but at the end of the day, it's the same game, and that's what we all love. And again, I think it's great that they continue to grow it that way and get these phenomenal athletes their names, right. Those are the ones on the back of those jerseys. Actually, on the bottom of those jerseys, I don't know if you saw. Again, you're
Yes.
in the States, right? The Molson Canadian, right? They put their sponsorship on the top bar to, for everyone to see their names on the bottom. I think that's, incredible marketing on number one, but number two, I think that's incredible for the game too. So now we can see, these incredible players and who's actually making these plays and hopefully getting those jersey sales up for them too. So.
Exactly. I am super excited to see what the team names are. I still haven't like officially picked a team yet. I'm still undecided. I think
Yeah.
I'm still trying to decide who's going to be my team because I don't have a Chicago team, so I don't have a default. And I live close to Boston now, but I'm just not sure. But I'm leaning towards Boston only because of Hillary Knight. But I'm conflicted, and you don't care about this. This is just my internal fan
you could be a
brain.
PWHL Ottawa fan if you want. There you go. Then that's my team. If we're going to talk about the PWHL, obviously it's the team I watch the most again because of Zoe Boyd. But again, it's that's a team I cheer for. So I mean, something to think about.
I know. It's a big decision though, Frank.
Yeah, it is. Yes, it's true. Yeah, because I know you're a Blackhawks fan, right? So
yeah, I have this like free slate, this like opportunity to pick.
Yeah, a lot of pressure.
Stressing me out just right now. I can't think about. I can't talk about it anymore. It's making me really anxious. I don't know what to do. Tell everybody a little bit more about your Gremlin goaltending and what you do for players and families and how you help them.
Yeah, so I work with different AAA organizations around the Greater Toronto area. That's where I'm located now. So, for example, coaching different teams in different areas. Again, you wouldn't know where they are, so I won't get too depth. But they're AAA programs, and I'm a part of their goaltending development. So I'll be their goalie coach for the season, and building those partnerships within the communities again. Kind of help goaltending development in Canada, even if it's at a small scale, again, just in the Ontario kind of Toronto area. But it's something, and a lot of time, goalies I've coached in the past, from all these years of coaching, the last, I think it's like 13, 14 years now in Quebec and in North Bay and everywhere that I've been, that I've scouted and coached for. I think I still keep in contact with these goaltenders, and I kind of give them kind of like their gatekeeper, if you will. Like I help them kind of navigate their next steps, and they still come to me for advice on where what would be the best program for me to go to next, if that's junior, if that's a university program. Maybe they're struggling mentally throughout their season, they're in a slump, they might give me a call, we'll jump on a Zoom call, go through video. So it's just keeping tabs on the goalies I've worked with and making them feel like they're not alone, because I know I felt that way when I played, and again, it was a totally different hockey world back then. Goalie coaches didn't really exist as much, and they didn't really have the tools as we do now, which is, again, they're the kind of the pioneers, so you have to respect that. But for them not feeling like they're on their own, because again, a lot of the head coaches and assistant coaches don't know goaltending, they don't know how it feels to be in their position. So to have somebody that they can call upon, and I'm not there to take their money. Like, this is just, again, relationships. It's free. This consulting and family advising. I'm not one of those family advisors that, if I get you to a program, I charge you a stupid amount of money to do basically nothing. For me, it's I wanted, because I want to help grow the game. I care about each and every goaltender that I built a relationship with, and I want to help them get to the next level. So I'll do whatever I can with my network. Obviously, with what I've learned over the years from my mentors, and hopefully I can put it into their game, even if it's through video, or just from a phone call to help them kind of get out of that slump and also get to the next level.
I think it's great what you do. So if people want to connect with you, I'll put your links in the show notes so they can connect with you on Twitter or your website, and get in touch with you if they're interested in working with you. And
yeah, for sure.
I think we've covered it all.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot. So thank you for letting me ask all my millions of questions about everything to do with all of the sport. It's really nice to talk to somebody on the inside of the game and who's seeing things up front and get your opinions and thoughts on the game that we all love. So thank you, Frank.
No, thank you again. Yeah, I appreciate your time. And the game's always changing, so there's always something to talk about.
Thanks for coming over to our House of Hockey podcast and hanging out with us. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. And in the meantime, you can follow us on social media. Just look for House of Hockey podcast. We'll be back next week.